everyone, my name is Jade Struck. I'm an ambassador for Henry Rifles, and as you guys know, lever actions have taken the industry by storm. Everyone's got them. I myself fell in love with them quite a few years ago. If you guys don't know about me, I am a competition shooter, a firearms instructor, and I just have a love for learning new platforms, running them well, and kind of taking the approach of how do we run these as quickly as we can, as effectively as we can, and still having a great time, which is why I thought today we could just run through some of the fundamentals of how to run your lever action, mostly because I have not found a lot of information online regarding this topic, and I thought we could do it together, learn together, and have a great time. I don't know about you guys, but I grew up watching some of those classic Western action films, and so for me, when I'm running a Henry, I do put on my John Wayne cap and like to have a bit of fun. And if you guys like to watch either old action films or new action films, I'm sure you guys have gotten some inspiration from some of our latest movie stars on how to run their firearms. And I have a bit of experience in that department of training actors on how to run their firearms effectively. So I'm hoping today we can embody some of those characteristics of moving fast and confidently with your gear, but still also really hammering home how to run them effectively and always being safe. Before we get started, I'd like to review the firearm handling rules just so that we can be safe and have a great time. So the first one is always treat every firearm as if though it's loaded at all times. Always keep your trigger finger off of the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Never aim at anything you don't intend to kill or destroy, and always know what's beyond the target that you are engaging at all times. We have a great array of targets here, so we are going to absolutely have some fun today. I can guarantee you guys by the time that we're done with today's session, you might not be John Wayne, you might not be Annie Oakley, but you're gonna be one step closer to reaching that goal. Let's get started. For today's lesson, we're gonna be focusing mostly on the fundamentals, the key features of running a lever action. So I chose the H001, which is your standard 22 lever action Frontier from Henry Rifles, because it's low recoil, it's easy to manage, it's a great gun to start training on, and it's also personally one of my favorites. So to start, let's talk about grip, because the way that I run my lever action is a little bit different than I would run another, either a bolt action sometimes or standard AR. So to start, we're gonna start with our 3 amigos that aren't working with our trigger finger or our thumb. That's gonna go right into the lever loop, and they're just gonna hang out here, lightly cupping around the side of the stock. Trigger finger is off the trigger until we're ready to shoot, so it just stays above the trigger guard. And then our thumb is gonna hang out on the dominant side of our stock here. Sometimes we have a natural propensity to wanna wrap that thumb around the back, but because when we're running our lever, we wanna be thinking about shots off, get our next round into our chamber. So keeping that thumb on the dominant side of our stock is gonna help us run that a little bit more quickly. Having our non-dominant hand, I like to blade my thumb in line with the barrel. It's just something that I like to keep kind of across the board no matter what platform I'm running. And then those 4 amigos that are hanging out just cup lightly around the forearm. And then we punch out. Stock placement in our dominant shoulder. I like to think when we're shooting heavier calibers out of our lever action, so I'm running a 22, I run the 45-70 just the same way, thinking about keeping that dominant shoulder forward. So when we come up, we put that stock into the fleshy part of our shoulder, keeping that shoulder forward, keeping consistency of where that shoulder is placed across the board. So whether you're shooting a 22 or a 45-70, we're not moving what we're doing up in our shoulders here. And then we're gonna rest our chin onto our stock. It's not our chin, actually, it's our cheek. Onto our stock, and then we're gonna look down those sights. Why this is important, because sometimes people, when they're new at shooting, 22, you're not gonna have much of a pull back from actually experiencing any kind of recoil, but when we get to the heavier calibers, you might. That third point of contact of having your cheek on the stock is gonna help you actually mitigate recoil and keep the rifle where it's supposed to be. So we just rest it there. We're looking down our sights, and when it comes to our stance, we wanna have a split stance, almost like a fighting stance. So my dominant foot kicked into the back, non-dominant foot is forward of my body, split stance, leaning into that non-dominant foot in the knee, having a slight bend, dominant leg is straight into the back. So we're really thinking about leaning into what we're engaging as far as targets go, because we wanna have a solid base. So not with a 22, but as we get higher up in calibers, we don't want our recoil to be knocking us back. We wanna give as much of a force behind the firearm as possible, get us shooting where we're aiming. Before we go into lever actuation, which we are going to here, I just wanna make a note on where our elbows are supposed to be. I like a tucked in elbow. I don't like a chicken wing, generally just because it's gonna keep, to not get too technical, but we're gonna get those lats engaged. We're gonna get our whole structure working together to work through our firearm down onto our target. So making sure that those arms stay kind of screwed down. And then when it comes to lever actuation, we want to think about not down and forward. Henrys are notorious for having the smoothest actions that you've ever ran in your life. So there's not anything necessary beyond just forward and back, forward and back. And you guys can practice this here, keep your finger off the trigger, and just work that lever. And then remember, when you come back up, get those 3 amigos and that thumb back onto your stock. And just run your lever. You see guys how smooth that is? The 22's got it going on out here. Another note too is, when it comes to maneuvering your firearm, working that lever, you guys keep it shouldered the whole time. The only time that we're unshouldering our rifle generally is with the side gate, and that's when we're going to reload. So especially with our tube feds or our lever action Supremes that are mag fed, even those you don't have to unshoulder. So keeping it up, making sure that when you're running that lever, and when it comes to actually shooting, once that shot's off, you're getting onto that lever and you're thinking about next steps. I get a lot of people that ask me, Jade, how do you shoot faster? And it's not about thinking about shooting faster. It's thinking about, how do I get the next step done sooner? So we're thinking everything in a step process. Just speeding up that next step, and the time in between the steps is what's gonna help you progress in your speed overall. All right, to revisit what we talked about over at the bench, because you guys couldn't see my full body, I do wanna show you guys the stance and review one more time what the shoulders and arms are doing. So we're in our split stance, non-dominant foot is forward leaning. This is a standard rifle shooting stance for me. And so it's the same across all platforms, no matter what you're running. Because we're running a 22, it might seem a bit extreme, but again, I like consistency across the board. So we're leaning in on that front leg, back leg is straight. Remember, elbows are corkscrewed down. Keep that dominant shoulder where our stock's placed forward, so you can get some more structure behind the actual stock. Remember, we're pulling into our shoulder slightly with the non-dominant hand, and then see how I kind of like to wrap that thumb around. We're gonna keep it on the dominant side of the stock. And then let's go ahead and get shooting. Remember that movement is just forward and back, it's not down. So it's really nice and smooth and simple. We're just gonna do 2 rounds here. Load up the chamber, 1 and 2. Remember to keep that trigger press nice and smooth straight to the rear. Of course, when you're running that lever, the finger's gotta come off the trigger, out of the trigger guard, full through with that lever run. And then the main thing for me when I'm thinking about running a lever action is just, once that first shot's off, getting onto that lever for the second, and then when you see it in your sights, then you're squeezing. Once you've got all of those fundamentals, you marry them together, you can build a super solid foundation. It'll look something like this. So how do we practice this at home? I like to have 1 or 2 targets. There's a number of different ways that we can train with just simply 2 targets. So you can switch up how far away you are from your target. So you have more of distance, it's a smaller target, more intentionality behind the sights and the trigger press. The closer up, you of course can speed up quite a bit. Having 2 different targets, you can transition where on the target you are hitting, whether it's lower in the A zone or in the upper A zone, or from target to target. You can switch up round count as well. So I always like to start off with a single round to a single target. Then the transition to that is 2 shots on the same target in the center of mass. And then the transition from that is 1 shot on one target, transition over to the other target, and then you can reverse the direction that you're sweeping in. And then also just adding in more rounds, and then also you can add in more movement. So there's a lot of things that you can do with quite a few different target systems, and then utilizing the space around you. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I want you guys to remember that reps matter. As much time behind your rifle as you can get in, as much round sound range as you can get in, the better, and the quality of those reps matter. So remember to hammer home on those fundamentals, spend some time with your rifles, get to the range and train. You won't regret it, and also it will show in your shooting and your skill set. Remember that shooting is a perishable skill. I hate to admit that it is, but it is important that we make the time to get on the range and train and find those results that we've been looking for. All right, I told you guys earlier I had a surprise for you, and it was the all-weather, which happens to be one of my favorite Henrys that I don't own, and I will one day. It's on my Christmas list. But I just want to show you guys with those fundamentals applied. It doesn't matter if you're shooting a 22 or you're shooting a 45-70. It's all the same. You'll be able to manage that recoil well and have a great time doing it. Almost like shooting a 22, to be honest with you. When you have those good fundamentals behind the rifle, you'll have a great time. That's it, folks. Thank you guys for watching. God bless you guys. Remember, Henry rifles made in America are not at all. Go grab your gear, get out to the range, have a great time, be safe, and I'll see you next time.